Chapter 1. The Wolf in the Mist. The ancient forest known as the Whispering Pines was a place of deep shadows and quiet secrets, a world where sunlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy of trees that had stood for centuries. For Ivy, a wildlife photographer with a spirit as untamed as the subjects she loved to capture, the forest was not a place of fear but a sanctuary. It was her favorite place on earth, a living gallery where every moss-covered log and every babbling brook held the potential for a perfect photograph. She had been camping deep within the woods for 3 days, her tent a small, colorful speck against the immense, timeless green, all in hopes of photographing a family of rare silver-winged owls that were said to nest in the area. The forest was her office, her church, and her home, and she moved through it with a respectful confidence that few people possessed. This particular morning had dawned with a thick, heavy fog that clung to the trees like a ghostly blanket, muting all sound and reducing the world to a palette of soft grays and muted greens. The air was cool and damp, each breath tasting of wet earth and pine. Ivy loved mornings like this. The fog made the familiar forest feel new and mysterious, perfect for capturing moody, ethereal shots. She packed her camera gear carefully, her movements quiet and deliberate, and set out from her campsite, following a deer trail that ran alongside a rushing, rock-strewn stream. The only sounds were the squelch of her own boots in the soft ground and the distant, rhythmic drip of water falling from the branches high above. She was completely alone, and for a while, she was perfectly content. It was a sound that broke the spell, a sound that was entirely wrong for this peaceful place. It was a sharp, metallic snap, followed immediately by a pained, guttural cry that was cut off almost as soon as it began. The sound was one of pure, sudden agony, and it came from a dense thicket of ferns just ahead, near the water's edge. Ivy's heart, which had been beating a slow, steady rhythm, immediately kicked into a frantic gallop. Every instinct told her to be cautious, to retreat, but a deeper, more compelling instinct, the one that made her care for injured creatures, pushed her forward. She crept closer, her camera forgotten, her entire being focused on the source of that terrible noise. Pushing a large, dripping fern frond aside, she saw him. It was a wolf, but unlike any she had ever seen or even read about. He was enormous, his fur a stunning mix of charcoal gray and silver that seemed to absorb the faint light. He was lying on his side, his powerful body taut with strain, and one of his front paws was caught in the cruel, steel jaws of a leg-hold trap. The metal teeth had bitten deep, and a small, dark patch of blood stained the beautiful fur around it. His chest heaved with ragged, panicked breaths, and his eyes, a warm, intelligent honeygold, were wide with a mixture of shock, pain, and a fierce, proud fury. He was magnificent and terrifying all at once, a king of the forest brought low by a piece of human carelessness. Ivy stood frozen, her own breath caught in her throat. This was a predator, a creature of raw power, and he was cornered and in immense pain. The logical part of her brain screamed at her to back away slowly. But as she looked into those honey-colored eyes, she didn't see a mindless beast. She saw a noble creature, proud and intelligent, suffering terribly. She knew she had to help. She knelt slowly, placing her camera bag on the ground, and held her empty hands out where he could see them. "Shoo, it's okay," she murmured, her voice soft and steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to help you get free." She kept talking, a continuous, calm stream of words about the annoying fog, about the pretty stream, about how everything was going to be all right. She inched closer, her movements slow and predictable. The wolf watched her, his intense gaze never leaving her face. A low growl rumbled in his chest, a clear warning, but he didn't snap or lunge. It was as if he were assessing her, trying to decide if she was a threat or a solution. When she was finally within arm's reach, she could see the trap clearly. It was old and rusty, but the spring was still strong. She would need to use all her strength to pry the jaws apart. Positioning her feet for leverage, she wrapped her hands around the cold, rough metal. "This might hurt for a second," she whispered, more to herself than to him. Then, with a grunt of effort, she pushed. Her muscles strained, her knuckles turning white. The metal groaned in protest, and the wolf flinched as the pressure on his wounded leg shifted. For a terrifying moment, she thought she wasn't strong enough. But then, with a final gritty screech, the jaws opened just enough. "Now, pull your foot out," she urged, her voice tight with the strain of holding the heavy metal apart. The wolf seemed to understand. In one fluid, painful-looking motion, he pulled his injured paw from the trap. The moment he was free, Ivy's strength gave out. The jaws snapped shut with a loud, definitive clang that echoed unnaturally in the fog. She fell back onto the damp moss, breathing heavily, her hands raw and aching. The wolf was free. He stood on 3 legs, holding the injured one up, and looked at her. The growling had completely stopped. There was no sound except for their shared, heavy breathing and the gentle rush of the stream. The wolf's intelligent honeygold eyes seemed to look right into her soul, and that warm, tingly feeling she had felt earlier spread through Ivy's chest again, a feeling of connection so strong it made her heart ache. It was a feeling of something old and deep and profoundly right. The wolf took a limping step toward her, then another. He lowered his great head and gently, so gently, nuzzled her hand with his cold, wet nose. Then, he gave her fingers a soft, grateful lick. The touch sent another wave of that incredible warmth through her. He held her gaze for one long last moment, as if memorizing her face, before he turned and, despite his injury, moved with a silent, powerful grace into the thick, swirling fog. In seconds, he had vanished, as if he were a part of the forest itself. Ivy sat there for a long time, the cold from the ground seeping through her clothes, but a strange, new fire glowing in her chest. The encounter felt like a dream, but the raw skin on her hands and the closed, vicious trap were proof it was real. She gathered her things, her mind racing. She had come to the forest to photograph owls, but she had found something else entirely, something that was now a part of her. The walk back to her camp was a blur. The magical forest no longer felt just beautiful, it felt alive with a secret that she now shared. That night, curled in her sleeping bag, she knew, with a certainty that settled deep into her bones, that the wolf with the honey-gold eyes was not gone from her life. Their story, whatever it was, had only just begun. Chapter 2: The Moon's Call. The familiar world of her small apartment and the bustling city felt like a distant memory to Ivy in the days that followed her return from the Whispering Pines. The photographs she had taken of the silver-winged owls, usually a source of great pride and excitement, now seemed like pictures from someone else's life, images from a time before her world had been irrevocably altered. The hum of traffic outside her window was an irritating noise compared to the forest's symphony of wind and water. Her mind was a constant reel of that foggy morning. The feel of the cold, rough trap under her hands, the raw power of the wolf's body, the startling intelligence in those honey-gold eyes, and the shocking, electric warmth that had flooded her when he had licked her hand. It was a feeling that had taken root deep within her, a persistent, humming energy that made her own skin feel too tight, a restless pull that kept her heart constantly yearning for the deep, quiet woods. The forest was no longer just a place she visited for work. It was a place that held a piece of her soul, and she felt its absence like a physical ache, a hollow space nothing in the city could fill. This new, strange reality of longing was answered on the 3rd evening after her return. She was in her darkroom, the dim red light casting long shadows, the sharp, chemical smell of developer filling the air as she carefully processed the owl photographs. The rhythmic sloshing of the chemicals in their trays was a familiar, almost meditative sound. A soft, firm knock on her apartment's front door broke her concentration. It was not the hurried rap of a delivery person or the friendly tap of a neighbor. This knock was deliberate and solid, and it seemed to vibrate through the floor. A prickle of instinct, the same one that had guided her in the forest, told her exactly who was on the other side. Her heart began to beat a wild, frantic rhythm against her ribs as she wiped her hands on a towel and walked to the door. She opened it to find the hallway filled with the tall, broad-shouldered frame of a stranger. He stood there, his face illuminated by the soft glow from her apartment. He was handsome in a stark, rugged way, with hair the color of dark shadows and eyes that she would have known anywhere, the same warm, intelligent honeygold that had haunted her dreams. He was dressed in simple, dark clothes of sturdy leather and soft-looking cloth that seemed both practical and strangely out of place in her modern apartment building. He carried the scent of the deep woods with him, pine needles, cold night air, and damp earth. For a long, suspended moment, they simply looked at each other. The humming energy in Ivy's blood erupted into a roaring cascade. The warm, tingly feeling from the forest returned, so powerful it made her feel slightly light-headed. It was a feeling of homecoming, of a missing part of her spirit finally sliding back into its rightful place. "My name is Jax," he said, his voice a low, quiet rumble that seemed to vibrate right through her. It was the same underlying power she had sensed in the wolf's presence, but now shaped into human words, layered with a gravity that commanded a respectful silence. "I came to thank you for what you did in the forest." Ivy's voice was a breathless whisper. The wolf. A single, slow, deliberate nod. Yes. She stepped back, a silent invitation, and he crossed the threshold into her home. He seemed to make the small space feel even smaller, his presence filling the room. He didn't look around at her photographs on the walls or her comfortable, cluttered furniture. His intense gaze remained fixed on her, studying her face as if she were the most captivating landscape he had ever seen. He began to speak, and his words painted a new world over the top of her familiar one. He told her of the Whispering Pines Pack, a community of people who had lived in the deepest, most hidden parts of the forest for generations. They were not monsters, he explained with a patient, solemn air, but guardians. The wolf was not a separate beast he became. It was another side of his very essence, as fundamental to him as his own breath. He spoke of a sacred duty to protect the wild heart of the forest, to maintain a balance that the outside world had long forgotten. It was a truth that should have been unbelievable, yet hearing it from him, seeing the raw, unshakable honesty in his golden eyes, it felt more real and more right than anything she had ever known. Then he told her about mates. His voice changed, dropping into a softer, more reverent tone, filled with an emotion so deep it made her own heart ache in sympathy. "For my kind," he said, leaning forward slightly, his gaze holding hers captive, "there is one person, one single soul the universe has crafted perfectly for you. It is a bond that goes deeper than friendship, stronger than any vow. It is a pull in your blood, a song that one heart sings and the other is born knowing." His eyes searched her face, seeming to see every secret hope, every lonely night she had ever spent looking at the world through a camera lens. "When you knelt in the fog, fearless and full of compassion, I felt it. The bond snapped into place for me the moment your hands touched that trap to free me. You are my mate, Ivy." The word hung in the chemical-scented air of her apartment, immense and profound. It was a word from the oldest of stories, yet it settled over her not as a fantasy, but as the simple, stunning truth she had been waiting for her entire life without knowing it. It was the only thing that could explain the magnetic pull, the deep-seated certainty, the feeling of finally being whole. He had given a name to the quiet emptiness she had carried, an emptiness that had now been utterly filled by his presence. A few days later, he asked her to come to his home. There was no fear, only a thrilling, breathless anticipation as she followed him up a path that was invisible to her until he pointed out the subtle signs, a specific pattern in the moss, a seemingly random stack of stones. They traveled deep into the heart of the Whispering Pines, the air growing cooler and rich with the scent of pine and damp earth, until they came to a secluded valley sheltered by towering ancient trees. The village of the Whispering Pines Pack was not built upon the land, but woven into it. Homes were nestled between the massive roots of the pines, built into the sides of gentle slopes, designed to be one with the forest. People moved with a fluid, natural grace, their laughter echoing warmly. They stopped and stared as Jax led Ivy through the center of the village. Their eyes, in various shades of amber and brown, held a natural wariness. She was an outsider, a human. But when they looked at Jax, at the unmistakable, protective way his large hand rested on the small of her back, their expressions softened into a quiet, respectful acceptance. Their alpha had found his mate. The following weeks were a blur of beautiful, life-altering discovery. Ivy split her time between her city apartment and the forest, her life becoming a dual existence that felt more complete than her single life ever had. In the Pax village, Jax showed her his world. He showed her hidden clearings where moonlight shone like liquid silver, and secret hot springs where steam rose to meet the cold night air. They walked for hours, and they talked even longer. He confessed the heavy weight of leading his people, the constant responsibility of keeping them safe and their secret secure. She told him about her solitary career, her love for capturing beauty, her feeling of being an observer on the edges of life, never truly a part of it. With every shared secret, every quiet moment of understanding, the bond between them strengthened, becoming a tangible, living thing that wrapped around them both. It was in the way his hand would find hers as they walked, their fingers lacing together as if designed to fit. It was in the long, warm embraces where she could feel the steady, strong beat of his heart against her cheek, a rhythm that promised forever. It was in the soft, lingering kisses they shared under the canopy of stars, kisses that started out shy and exploring and grew in confidence and passion, each one a silent promise, a taste of a deep, abiding love they were both discovering. The air between them crackled with a pure, intense romance, a connection built on a foundation of utter trust and a soul-deep recognition that this was where they were always meant to be. One evening, they sat on a thick, soft fur spread before a small, crackling fire outside his home. The sounds of the pack settling in for the night, the soft murmur of voices, the distant, harmonious howl of a wolf on patrol, was a comforting melody. Ivy leaned back against Jax's chest, his strong arms wrapped around her, his chin resting gently on top of her head. She had never felt so safe, so completely and perfectly content, as if every piece of her life had finally clicked into place. He shifted slightly, turning her in his arms so he could look into her eyes. The firelight danced in his golden gaze, which was filled with a love so profound it made her breath catch in her throat. "My soul," he whispered, his voice rough with a vulnerability she knew he showed no one else. "Recognized yours, Ivy. I think it has been searching for you through every lifetime. And now that I've found you, it will never, ever let you go. It will always find its way back to you." He wasn't asking a question. He was stating a fact as undeniable as the ancient trees surrounding them. It was a confession, a vow, and a declaration of a love that felt as eternal as the forest itself. Ivy looked at him, at the man who was also a wolf, her protector, her other half, and she knew. She knew with every fiber of her being that her own soul had been searching for his, too. "I know," she whispered back, her voice thick with tears of pure, unadulterated joy. "My soul is yours, Jax. It's finally, completely home." Chapter 3: The Hunter's Shadow. The golden, sun-drenched days that followed were the most profoundly fulfilling of Ivy's entire life. Her world had beautifully and irrevocably split into two harmonious halves, each one nourishing the other. By day, she continued her work as a wildlife photographer, her eye for beauty now sharpened by the deep, soulful connection she had found in the forest. The editors who received her photographs commented on their new depth and emotion, never suspecting the magical source of her inspiration. They could never have imagined the other, secret half of her existence, the part that began each evening when she would follow the hidden paths deep into the whispering pines, her heart beating a rhythm of joyful anticipation that only quieted when she saw Jax waiting for her at the edge of the clearing, his honey-gold eyes lighting up at the sight of her, a silent welcome that felt more like home than any place ever had. In the Pax village, she was no longer just a visitor or a curious human. She was Jax's, and the Pack had gradually, warmly, woven her into the very fabric of their daily lives. She learned their customs, helped the elders prepare healing salves from forest plants, and listened, enthralled, to their ancient stories spoken under the vast, star-strewn sky, stories that were never written in any book. Her connection with Jax deepened into something unshakable and mature, a bond that felt as ancient as the mountains surrounding them. It was in the easy, comfortable silences they shared, a language built on mutual understanding that needed no words. It was in the protective, possessive way his hand would rest on the curve of her waist, a constant, warm pressure that whispered she was his and he was hers, a claim she welcomed with all her heart. It was in the slow, deep kisses they exchanged in the quiet moments before dawn, kisses that spoke of a growing, passionate love and a commitment that was taking root, anchoring them together for all their tomorrows. The bond between them was no longer a strange, new sensation. It was the very bedrock of her existence, the steady, humming truth that gave purpose to her every breath. But the peace of the forest was a delicate balance, easily disrupted. A subtle creeping unease began to permeate the hidden valleys of the whispering pines, a change felt not with the ears, but in the gut, a primal warning that put everyone on edge. The normal, bustling activity of the forest creatures grew hesitant, their movements furtive. Jax became more watchful, his powerful frame often tense, his brilliant golden gaze constantly scanning the deepest shadows between the trees, his senses stretched to their limit. The relaxed man who held her through the night was now often locked in deep, hushed conversations with his most trusted warriors, their faces etched with lines of grim concern. The threat, when he finally explained it to her, was direct and personal. The hunter who had set the trap had returned to the forest, but he was not alone this time. He had brought others, a small group of ruthless men armed with more than just traps. They carried high-powered rifles and tranquilizer darts, and they were actively hunting the legendary giant wolf for a private trophy collection. They knew the wolf was special, and their greed made them relentless. A cold, sharp dread coiled in Ivy's stomach, colder than the deepest mountain stream. The sanctuary she had found was under a direct and violent threat. Her fear was a physical, piercing worry, not for herself, but for Jax, for the pack, for the vulnerable pups who tumbled and played in the sun-dappled clearings. Jax, as Alpha, devised a careful plan to lead the hunters on a complex, exhausting chase through the most treacherous and confusing parts of the forest, far away from the vulnerable pack village. It was a dangerous mission that required perfect timing and carried the constant risk of a misstep, a wrong turn that could lead to a silver bullet instead of a safe escape. The morning the warriors left, the village was blanketed in a heavy, anxious silence so profound it felt like the forest itself was holding its breath. Jack stood before Ivy, his hands cradling her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks with a tenderness that belied the fierce strength in his hands. His eyes were pools of fierce determination and unwavering love. "You must stay within the protected circle of the village," he said, his voice low and firm, a command laced with a desperate, heartfelt plea. "Do not venture beyond the marked stones. These men are dangerous and determined. They would not hesitate to use you to get to me. You are my heart, Ivy. Promise me you will be safe." Ivy could only nod, her throat too tight with unshed tears to form words. She pressed a smooth, dark feather from a silver-winged owl, her first gift to him, into his palm, a tangible piece of her love and her world to carry with him. He closed his fingers around it, his expression softening for a fleeting, heart-breaking second before he leaned in and kissed her. It was a kiss filled with all the love and fear and desperate hope that swirled in the air around them. Then he was gone, shifting into his powerful wolf form and leading his warriors on their perilous quest, leaving behind a void of waiting that seemed to swallow all sound and light. The hours stretched, thin and torturous. Ivy stayed with the elders and the mothers with young children, trying to help with the daily chores, but her mind was with Jax, leading a deadly chase through the unforgiving wilderness. The not knowing was a special kind of agony, each minute feeling like an hour. Driven by a need to feel useful, to contribute in some way, she focused on what she knew best, observation. From the highest safe vantage point within the village boundaries, she used her photographer's eye and her long lens to scan the distant ridges, not to take pictures, but to watch for any sign of movement, any flash of color that didn't belong in the green and gray landscape. It was during this vigil that she saw them, a flicker of orange, the color of hunters' vests, moving along a ridge much closer to the village than anyone had anticipated. They had split up, and one group was circling back. Her promise to stay safe warred with her need to protect her new family. Taking a calculated risk, she alerted the few warriors who had remained to guard the village. Using her knowledge of the land from her photography hikes and the pack's guidance, she was able to direct them to a narrow, hidden pass the hunters were heading toward. The pack warriors moved with silent, deadly efficiency, using their knowledge of the terrain to create loud, frightening rock slides and deep, echoing howls that sounded like a much larger pack was surrounding the hunters. The men, confused and terrified, turned and fled from the unseen forces, their progress into the heart of the pack's territory successfully thwarted. When Jax and his hunters returned, weary and battle-tense but victorious from their own dangerous game of chase, it was to the news of Ivy's calm leadership and clever tactics. He found her not waiting as a frightened bystander, but as a calm, integral part of the village's defense. He saw not just his mate, but a partner, a woman whose human perspective and unique skills had protected his home in a way his raw strength alone could not. The relief and overwhelming pride that transformed his face was a sight she would cherish forever. In the quiet, triumphant aftermath, as the pack celebrated their safety and the hunter's retreat, the reality of the choice before her settled over Ivy. She stood with Jax on the high ledge that overlooked his village, the one that had become her true home. The wind played with strands of her hair, and the setting sun set the sky ablaze with brilliant oranges and purples. He held both her hands in his touch gentle but his expression solemn and open, laying his heart bare before her. "You have a life out there," he said, his voice rough with emotion, gesturing toward the world beyond the trees. "A life of art and recognition. A safe life. My life is here, bound to this land and this pack. It will always hold challenges, dangers that your world does not. The choice of where you build your future, it must be yours, Ivy. I will love you forever, no matter what you decide." Ivy looked out at the majestic, wild beauty of the forest she had helped to protect. She thought of her small, peaceful apartment and her career behind a camera lens. Then she thought of the vibrant, loving community of the pack, the profound, soul-deep connection she felt to this land and its people, and the man standing before her. She saw her past, her present, and her entire future in his loving golden eyes. She squeezed his hands, her own decision crystal clear, a truth she had known in her soul since the moment in the fog. "My heart is not defined by four walls or a career, Jax," she said, her voice clear and strong, filled with a love that would endure any storm. "It stopped being tied to a place the moment I found you in that trap. My heart is your home. And I am yours, completely. I choose you. I choose this life. I choose us." The joy that illuminated his face was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. He pulled her into his arms, and their lips met in a kiss that was deeper and more profound than any they had shared before. It was a kiss of promise, of a future chosen and embraced, a seal on a bond that had been tested by adversity and forged in unwavering partnership and love. And as Ivy stood there, wrapped in the arms of her wolf, her mate, her equal, high in the forest they would protect together, she knew her greatest adventure was only just beginning. If you were captivated by Ivy and Jax's journey of fierce love and powerful partnership, there are countless more stories waiting to be discovered in the world of the Whispering Pines pack. To be the first to know when the next chapter of their lives unfolds, and to find yourself lost in other worlds where courage meets destiny and love conquers all, be sure to subscribe. Your next unforgettable adventure into romance and magic is just a click away.